Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished panelists and participants, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the webinar, Building Back Better, Protecting Biodiversity, Combating Land Degradation, and Mitigating Climate Change to Reduce the Risks of Future Pandemics and the Importance of a Coherent Approach. This webinar has been jointly organized by the Government of Egypt in its capacity as President of the 14th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention of Biological Diversity, the CBD, and the Secretariat of the CBD. My name is David Ainsworth. I'm the Information Officer at the Secretariat of the CBD, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to serve as your moderator today. Before we begin, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for all. So first, I'd like you to know that the session is being recorded and will be made available soon after on the webinar's meeting page. This session is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. The link has been shared in the chat box, or will be made available very soon in case you wish to share it with your different networks even while the broadcast is taking place. Questions can be made to the panelists through the question box in the panel to your left. We will try to address as many questions as time allows us, but please, we do ask for your understanding if we are unable to address all of them today. So with those items, excellencies, distinguished panelists and participants, I now have the pleasure of introducing the host of this webinar, Her Excellency, Ms. Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment, Egypt, and the COP14 President to the Convention of Biological Diversity. She will open the webinar session with her welcoming remarks and a statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, David. I would like to welcome you all, my dear colleagues and partners and secretariats of the convention and champions of saving our planet Earth in the most critical time. I would like to also welcome all the participants that have joined us today in this virtual webinar. I wouldn't have put that better than what David had said in building back better. If we intend to build back better with the pandemic of COVID-19, we need to look further on not one side of an angle, but the three sides of the angle. We believe that during the CBD COP14, all the stakeholders, the Secretariat, our partners, our member states, all agreed that we need a balanced, a fair, and ambitious post-2020 framework. However, we also noticed that one important fact that was not there and needs to be included is to stop the delinking between the climate change, the biodiversity, and the land degradation. When we come to see that how the world evolved around time, what are the needs of the human beings, of shelter, of food, of education, of health, all that depends on really the ecosystem, the balanced one, the land, the sea, the human being, the animal, the plants. So we cannot, with what the world agreed upon 30+ years of the importance to combat climate change and work more on not losing more of our biodiversity and the land degradation, that we willingly dealing that from each other. The coronavirus and what happened to that had affected around 7.8 billion people around the world. It did cause disaster economic drawbacks that could reach $9 trillion over the next few years if we come by as economists and look into that. And the root causes of that was simply that there are others who had over-exploited the natural resources, did not look better on how best to sustain really those resources, what measures could be done, and how best can we link the human activity by what happens on the land, what happens in the sea, what reactions do we do and interact in one another, and how we deal with the living things that are there on our planet Earth. Simply to put that. The pandemic and what has happened with the COVID-19 has taught us all a very important lesson that we need, and we are in a deep need to live in harmony with nature. Nevertheless, that nature does not need us. We were locked in our houses for many days, and every day the sun used to come up and the oceans are flowing and the birds are coming up, and nothing has changed. It is our life that has changed with that pandemic. And from that perspective, a couple of months ago, I've requested the Secretariat to think together of having that webinar for important messages that I would like you, as the Secretariat for the conventions, the representatives of the IFIs, or the experts, partners, or even my colleagues, fellow ministers, to look in depth really into that. It is something that when you come to see, it is our duty right now, more than ever, as long as we are holding those positions, regardless of that position, an NGO or a development partner or member state. But we are there. We're living in 2020. We're being held responsible as environmentalists, and as we know the truth, to work collectively and to work harder and to work louder and to work with one voice to say that we have no more option than to think of how best to work in favor of nature. How can we go back to nature, and how can we best start mobilizing more financial resources, raising more awareness, harmonizing more policy, working more in solidarity in that part. The One Health approach that was introduced to all of us a few years ago, the linkages between the animal and the human being and the environment and the land, could be one entry point that we would like to look at and start seeing how best can we materialize that. Each in his own or her own position can support and help this. The call that I am asking right now is a call for solidarity, for collaboration, for cooperation, a call that I am requesting not to look at each angle and each position alone, but rather to work together and see how best can we come with tangible results, with concrete policy measures, with applicable solutions for our Earth, and stop only thinking of each global environmental challenge as the most pressing one, because that has not proven effective. That has proven that we are simply wasting our time, our effort, our money, and we're not working for the favor of that generation. And I am speaking to myself before speaking to each and every single one of you. And from that perspective, we're trying to give, as Egypt, as the president of the CBD COP14, but also in every single venue that I have been working on for the last few months, whether through our partners with the UK on the coalition on adaptation and resilience, or before that meeting, I was vice chairing a bureau for the Bamako Convention on the hazardous waste. In every single position that I have been present in my capacity as the Minister of Environment for the Arab Republic of Egypt, I was trying to work more to unite us all together and to think collectively. And I think that there could be a good entry point, which is the global initiative that we have launched during the CBD COP14. That was 2 years ago, by the way, when we called for going back to the synergetic approach of linking the biodiversity, the land degradation, and the climate change to save time and effort and to efficiently use the financial resources. Now we have not much time and we need to work closely on that. given all those messages that I have been speaking about, and I'm sorry, David, I took a long time. It should have been a less opening remarks, but I'm really so alert and so concerned and so worried about how can we collectively work together and bridge any gaps, if there are any gaps within the upcoming few months, to have a one voice that is united, to raise more awareness, to work more in the favor of our future generation, to effectively use the financial resources, to build more national capacities, to harmonize more policies, because the world does need us now more than ever, and we cannot recline from our position regardless of that position, because we are present in 2020 and we are present during that critical pandemic that the world is facing. God bless us all and bless our children. Thank you very much, David. Over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Your Excellency. Thank you. I understand your passion, and we all understand the urgency that we all feel behind this. Solidarity and cooperation are very key words, very inspiring words in your opening remarks. So thank you very much. And I would now like to invite those of you who are joining us today to watch a video message provided by His Excellency, Mr. Huang Rongqiu, the Minister of Ecology and Environment of China, representing the incoming host government of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So I'll ask the technicians to activate that video, please.
Hello， 大家好，尊敬的雅思敏、福阿德女士、女士们、先生们、朋友们，我很荣幸代表生物多样性公约第15次缔约方大会东道国和后任主席国参加这次的研讨会。生物多样性公约是人类程序发展的血脉和根基，以多种形式维护着人类健康。新冠肺炎疫情的全球蔓延，引发了国际社会对人与自然关系的再思考。在全球生物多样性逐渐丧失和生态系统日益退化的严峻形势下，人类遭遇自然灾害的可能性以及面对灾害的脆弱性愈发凸显。充分运用基于自然的解决方案和一体化健康的理念，能够更好地推动气候变化、公众健康、自然灾害、生物安全、贫困等问题的协同解决，实现联合国2030年可持续发展目标。中国倡导生态文明理念，强调尊重自然、顺应自然、保护自然，坚持生态优先、绿色发展，努力实现人与自然的和谐共生，取得了积极的进展。2009年到2019年，中国完成造林7039万公顷，累计治理沙化土地1776万公顷，成为同期全球森林资源增长最多的国家。中国认真落实2009年提出的2020年国家减缓承诺，已经提前并超额实现了单位 GDP 碳排放强度下降45%的目标。可再生能源投资和装机容量也多年位居世界第一。目前，中国生态保护红线面积不少于陆地国土面积的25%，我们超过90%的陆地自然生态系统类型，89%的国家重点保护野生动植物种类都得到了妥善保护。通过实施重要生态系统保护和修复重大工程，中国计划在2035年实现全面保护濒危动植物及其栖息地，森林覆盖率达到26%，75%以上的可治理沙化土地得到妥善治理，自然海岸线保有率不低于35%等目标。未来中国将继续付出艰苦卓绝的努力，确保100%的完成气候变化国家自主贡献。中国的实践表明加强生态环境领域公约履约的协同增效 能够取得1+1大于2的效果。当前国际社会共同面临气候变化、生物多样性丧失、土地退化、大规模流行病等影响人类可持续发展的全球性挑战，更需要我们加强相关公约之间的协同增效，建立良好的国际协调和合作机制。面对全球性的重大挑战，人类是一荣俱荣、一损俱损的命运共同体。中国即将从埃及手中接过历史的接力棒，担任 COP15的东道国。中国感谢国际社会对筹办 COP15的支持，愿意与各方一道制定兼具雄心和务实的2020年后全球生物多样性框架。当前框架已经进入到了指标草案意见征集阶段，我们愿积极推动各方共同制定科学合理的指标体系，立足于增强社会生态系统的复原力，共同推行全面而包容的一体化健康策略。在此我也呼吁各缔约方动员最高层级的政治力量，各利益攸关方积极响应，从沙姆沙伊赫到昆明人与自然行动倡议，携手为建设人与自然和谐共生的地球生命共同体贡献最大的力量。最后预祝本次研讨会取得圆满成功，我也期待我们在不久的将来在昆明相聚。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister Rungqiu, for the inspiring video message and for reminding us again of the importance of the One Health approach, of nature, and again calling for the kinds of cooperation, collaboration, and harmonization that this workshop is about. It's my pleasure now to invite you to listen to Mr. Jigmet Takpa, who is the Joint Secretary in the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India. Mr. Takpa will be representing His Excellency, Minister Prakash Javadekar, the President of UNCCD's COP14. Mr. Takpa, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling me to give the message of Honorable Minister of Environment and Forest, Shri Prakash Javadekar. On behalf of Honorable Minister, I would like to express sincere regret that due to some preoccupation, Honorable Minister was not able to attend this webinar. He has expressed his regret, and I'm Joint Secretary in the Ministry. I'm reading out his message to this webinar. First of all, I'd like to thank Her Excellency Ms. Yasmin Fawad, Minister of Environment and Forest, Egypt, for calling us for this very webinar, and Excellencies who are panelists in today's webinar. We thank you for calling India to express our gratitude for being called for this webinar. So on behalf of Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Prakash Javadekar, he has sent the message, which I read it. I congratulate CBD Presidency, Honorable Minister of Environment, Government of Egypt, for holding this discussion on looking at biodiversity protection, addressing land degradation, and mitigation of climate change in a synergistic manner in order to reduce the risk of future pandemic and enhance human ecosystem and interaction in a sustainable manner. The current situation has nudged all the countries of the world to work together on various multilateral environmental agreements in a collaborative and cooperative manner. The collective approach to address the fundamental issues concerning protection and conservation of environment is the basis of a healthier and a greener planet that would promote equity and inclusive development. As co-presidency of UNCCD, India has been at the forefront of bringing the issue of land degradation at the core of this discussion around the many of the environmental concerns that the world is facing today. Land is most vital component for sustenance of life on the planet. Taking concerted action around land will have its co-benefit in addressing climate change as well as biodiversity conservation. With regard to the issue of land degradation, India has committed to achieve land degradation neutrality by 2030. Our visionary Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, has announced to increase our commitment to restore degraded land from 21 million hectares to 26 million hectare restoration by 2030. Humanity has a long history of living in harmony with nature, and this very nature holds the solution of emergent problems. We all have just to get in sync with our surrounding, which itself would help in moving on sustainable path through its tested time, that is nature-based solution. I hope the discussion will help in getting back in vibrancy of life in all its form and color. I wish all the success to this endeavor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chakpa, for delivering this great message on behalf of His Excellency Minister Javadekar and the presidency of UNCCD's COP14. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Mr. Andres Landareche, who is the UNFCCC COP25 Presidency Coordinator from Chile, and he is representing Her Excellency Ms. Carolina Schmidt, the Environment Minister of Chile. Mr. Landareche, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. Distinguished ministers and authorities and participants, it is a great pleasure to join you and speak on behalf of Chile and the COP25 presidency. I want to congratulate the president of COP14, His Excellency Mrs. Jasmine Foy, Minister of Environment of Egypt, and the Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity for organizing this very timely conference about the interlinkages between biodiversity, land degradation, and climate change, and the need for a coherent approach in our COVID-19 recovery efforts. As we know, the pace of change over the past 50 years has been unprecedented in human history. The human population has doubled, the global economy has expanded fourfold, and more than 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. However, this remarkable growth and prosperity has come at a heavy cost to the natural system that underpin life on Earth. Human activities have already severely altered 75% of land and 66% of marine environment. And around 25% of known plants and animal species are threatened by human actions, with 1 million species facing extinction, many within decades. The science is clear that climate change and nature loss are inextricably interlinked. The destruction of mangrove, peatland, tropical forests for agriculture and other uses contributes to 13% of total human CO2 emissions and will continue to exacerbate the effect of climate change. And business as usual scenario is not longer an option. That will assume that 20 species will be threatened with extinction from this warming alone. Biodiversity is critical, important to our health, our safety, our livelihood. Biodiversity underpins global nutrition and food security and help fight diseases. Unfortunately, current production and consumption pattern, land use and urbanization, population dynamics, trade, industry, and governance model strengthen the loss of biodiversity. Calling for a radical reset, it is critical. There is a need for a new mechanism of public-private collaboration and non-traditional flows of finance to secure a net zero emissions world by 2050. We're breaching the planet's boundaries beyond the ability of natural systems to cope, which is increasing the risk of large-scale, irreversible environmental and societal changes. Effectively managing and mitigating such risk requires a fundamental shift in thinking about the value of nature, including accounting for natural capital and the cost of ecosystem degradation within economic development. New business models enabled by digital technologies have the potential to accelerate this shift towards a nature positive and low carbon development path and unlock nature's value while minimizing resource use. Likewise, circular economy models and new technologies can both optimize use of inputs and minimize waste and enable real-time tracking and monitoring of global agricultural and industrial supply chain. The degradation of ecosystem, the loss of biodiversity, and its unsustainable use have increased the risk of disease spillovers from wildlife to livestock and from animals to people. Climate change exacerbates this danger and increases the risk from vector-borne diseases. Solutions to the issue of nature loss are complex, but unless we take transformative action urgently, the risk and impact of such loss will only accelerate for the detriment of present and future generations. Today, we're facing difficult times. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought one of the biggest socioeconomic crises the world has faced in centuries, affecting the life of people in all possible ways. In the short term, the first priority for government has been to protect the health of our citizens, but we must also deliver plans to recover our economy and jobs in the context of the other global crisis that has not been in quarantine, climate change. COVID-19 has postponed COP26, but it has not postponed the need for parties to deliver on their commitments under the Paris Agreement. Most importantly, the submissions of more ambitious NDCs this year in 2020. Updated NDC is not an unnecessary distraction from the pandemic. On the contrary, new updated NDC can be a blueprint that guides us to a truly sustainable economic recovery from COVID-19. In this spirit, in the month of April, in the middle of the pandemic, Chile presented a significantly enhanced NDC that, in line with the Paris Agreement, targets a long-term vision for carbon neutrality by 2050. Our NDC represents a critical milestone on this path, committing to a series of measures spanning from adaptation and integration actions for ocean, forests, circular economy, finance, and nature-based solutions. As we know, 2020 will be a year marked by COVID-19, but also by how governments and parties step up to take decisive climate action in these challenging circumstances and to ensure that the reactivation of our economies is compatible with a zero carbon future. We have a big challenge in front of us, no doubt, but at the same time, we have a unique opportunity to use this crisis to accelerate our transformation to a more inclusive, cleaner, healthier, low carbon, and resilient economy for the world's future. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Landereche, for your message on behalf of the COP25 presidency of the UNFCCC. Let me also thank Minister Fouad, Minister Runkyu, and Mr. Takpa, representing India, for reminding us all the crucial role that multilateralism and the work of all of these three Rio conventions play in light of the current global health crisis. It's also good to see the urgent need to foster transformative changes required to ensure a healthy planet. So as we see in those opening remarks, we have the language of harmonization, language of solidarity, the importance of nature-based solutions, and the need to look at a One Health approach as a way to integrate all of the work we do to deal with human health, animal health, and the health of the planet. Very inspiring remarks from all of the presidencies, leading us to our next discussion. So with that setting of the stage, let me move on to our first panel session now. First panel session one asks the question, how can the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, combating land degradation, and fighting climate change help to build back better and reduce the risks of future pandemics? In this session, we're very fortunate to hear from the executive secretaries of the three Rio conventions, as well as the Secretary General of the Convention on Wetlands, speaking on behalf of the liaison group of biodiversity-related conventions. And we also have the CEO of the Global Environment Facility. We'll hear remarks from all of them, and we may have some time for questions and answers. We'll see how this goes. So first, I'd like to begin by inviting Ms. Patricia Espinosa, who is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Ms. Espinosa, you have the floor. Let's see, do we have Espinosa? I can't hear. Ms. Espinosa, your sound seems to be off. Yeah, sorry, Ms. Espinosa, we're not able to hear you. My apologies. If we can have the technicians take a look at that and help enable Ms. Espinosa. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Espinosa, there seems to be a problem with the sound.
Okay, now
Yes, excellent.
yes,
You are loud and
okay.
clear.
Yeah,
Apologies.
there was a little signal saying that I had been muted by the organizer, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm
Our
very
apologies.
glad.
Our apologies.
I'm very glad to be able to join you, dear Minister Fuad, dear Jasmine. Thank you so much for your leadership in putting together this webinar and allowing us to not only talk about the different issues, but also address the need to look at the interconnectedness between the different issues. So in this first comment, I would like to basically share some remarks on that particular point, because anyway, we know that an opening statement limited to 3 or 4 minutes will not allow us to cover in detail all the subjects that we have gathered to discuss. So, dear colleagues, I think it's important to remind ourselves and all the people that are following this webinar that we may represent 3 separate conventions, but we are sharing one goal, which is to help build a clean, green, safe, healthy, and sustainable world. A world that is more equal and just for all. And in many ways, I think it's also important to remember that this was the original idea in Rio when the 3 conventions were created. That while there would be division of labor on several fronts, and while each convention would have their own detailed frameworks and agendas, implicit was the idea that our issues naturally coincided and that this would only grow stronger in the future. And this is what we are seeing. That vision was clearly the correct one. Today, as the Earth faces challenges on so many fronts, all exacerbated by a global pandemic, never has it been more important that we align our efforts even more strongly than before. I fully recognize that we have accomplished some great work together already, including today's webinar, which underlines our commitment to collaboration. But the urgency with respect to finding solutions in these challenging times provide an opportunity, and it is our responsibility, in fact, to underline these words of collaboration with action. So we have told the world leaders that they must combine efforts to recover from COVID-19. So frankly, we must do the same, all of us. This is also our opportunity to take action so that people, civil society, understands how the 3 issues under the 3 conventions intersect and how that intersection impacts them. In short, we need to build a better narrative. For example, do people know that climate change is a key driver pushing 1 million species to the brink of extinction? Do they understand how this is directly related to land degradation, desertification, and soil management? Do they understand how this relates to water, to wetlands, to the nutrition and quality of the food they eat? And do they understand how all of this also connects in reverse order? And in fact, this is not their job to connect the dots. It's our job. We must talk about these links to show people what this story tells us. So, dear colleagues, in these times in which we ask so much of others and there is so much action needed, we need also to rise to the challenge. We need to strengthen the communication and ties between our conventions. So we should not only call for collaboration, but also reflect it ourselves. And I have to say, with the leadership of my good friends, Elizabeth and Ibrahim, I think we have been doing some progress, but there is clearly a lot of room for further improvement. I am convinced that this is how we will get through these difficult times. And this is how we will build a greener, cleaner, healthier future for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Espinosa. Thank you for reminding us of the reasons for the emergence and the collaboration between, and reminding us that despite the ways that we're working together, we need to work further together to show and communicate to the world the relationship of all these agendas. So thank you very much for that. It's my pleasure now to introduce the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Ibrahim. Ms. Ibrahim, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, David. Sincere thanks to our presidents, co-president, Excellence Minister Ford, for organizing this event, and the Secretariat has had the pleasure to be behind you supporting this initiative. Completely associating myself with the statement made by Patricia. Indeed, the 3 Rio conventions are only divided by division of labor, but the work, the issues are connected directly. Thank you, other ministers, colleagues, all courtesies observed. The relationship between biodiversity and infectious diseases is complex, but the COVID-19 has shown that the loss and degradation of biodiversity continues to undermine the web of life and increases the risk of disease spillover from wildlife to people. By conserving and sustainably using biodiversity while sharing the benefits with equity, we can prevent the emergence of future diseases. Our efforts to build back better can be integrated with One Health approach and address the challenges of biodiversity, climate change, and land degradation. Permit me to suggest 5 elements for building back better. First, we should reduce the disease risk by conserving and restoring ecosystem. We prevent further degradation that creates the conditions that the emergence of other zoonotic diseases. At the same time, we can begin to restore the ecosystems of the world, and by reversing damage already done, we will also advance the climate and land agendas while generating employment. Second, we should promote sustainable, legal, and safe use of wildlife to have an immediate impact, not only on disease transmission resulting from illegal trade in wildlife, but also to help to rebuild livelihoods at local level. Third, we need to promote sustainable and safe agriculture, including crop and livestock production and aquaculture. This will provide not only animal and human health, but also provides the basis for climate-friendly agriculture that supports sustainable land use. We also have to look at the urban setting and create healthy cities and landscape that integrate biodiversity while supporting sustainable consumption to reinforce conservation and sustainable use beyond urban boundaries. And lastly, we need to promote healthy diets as a component of sustainable consumption. Reduce meat consumption, including elimination of bush meat from illegal sources, and the increased variety of foodstuffs from sustainable agriculture will support conservation and sustainable use while leading to a better overall healthy outcomes for population. As we carry out this, we need to build cooperation and complementarity among all actors and relevant instruments, including other multilateral environmental agreements and the work of other international organizations. These steps call for fundamental shifts in political economy, accountability, and governance. The negotiations of an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework that will support transformative change will be the basis to make such shift and represent the realization of the opportunity to build back better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maruma, for this message that reminds us of the concrete steps that we can take and concrete steps that allow us to achieve goals under all the different conventions and agreements that we have with us today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ibrahim Tiau, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Mr. Tiau, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David, and good afternoon, all of you, Excellency Minister Yasmin Fuad. I really appreciate your leadership in all you are doing, and especially for this webinar. I also would like to thank all of you and all protocols observed, as we say in Africa. This pandemic has created a lot of uncertainties. There is one thing, though, that there is almost a consensus. Indeed, we know how vulnerable all species are and how much we all depend on nature. Contrary to some assumptions, it turns out that the human species is just as vulnerable as any other species on Earth and on sea. So we are all rich and poor in the same boat. Secondly, we may also agree that the root causes of most global crises, whether COVID, drought, global warming, or biodiversity loss, all these crises are coming from the same place. It is now recognized that not only our health, but the health of our planet and the health of our economy may be directly affected by the overexploitation and abuse of nature. This is certainly exacerbated by unsustainable choices that drive land use change and habitat loss, unsustainable food production, and growing greenhouse gas emissions. If we can say that opportunities have arisen from COVID-19 pandemic, it is that the public is acutely aware of its cause and effect. They are increasingly making the connections with our broken food systems, accelerating climate change, land degradation, and the loss of species and habitat. This is one basis for a coherent approach. The so-called Rio Conventions are employing joint messaging and advocacy on how we can all act on carbon, species, soil, and water. Everyone has a role to play. Everyone has a stake in the future. As we, the executive secretaries of the Rio Conventions, wrote in a joint op-ed a few months back, and I quote, "A sound future can be built on a social contract for nature that will lead to a new normal that puts us in harmony with the environment, one that minimizes the outbreak of zoonotic epidemics, revives a profitable economy, and ensure that ecosystem services are available for everyone." End of quote. The Living Planet report produced by WWF, which has just been released today, is another reminder. It says, and I quote, "Land use change is currently the most important direct driver of biodiversity loss and on land, with climate change, overexploitation, pollution, and invasive species not far behind." End of quote. Building back better, therefore, calls for a reset, a transformational change. Transformational change means doing things very differently. From individual decisions that build new social norms to legal and policy reforms that enable us to grow and prosper in a safe operating environment. But how do we incentivize this change? People must understand what concrete actions are needed, accompanied by a clear vision that captures the imagination and will of humanity. So let us start by protecting and restoring nature. By doing so, we will reduce future risks to humanity. We will, at the same time, support an economic recovery powered by new jobs, livelihoods, business models, and value chains created in renewable energy and low carbon infrastructure. Most sustainable food systems and the conservation, sustainable use, and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems. We must do everything in our power to reduce the likelihood of future pandemics. We must avert other growing risks to society and economies: climate change, biodiversity loss, desertification, and land degradation and drought. Efforts by just one sector cannot prevent or mitigate these risks. A One Health approach is needed at all levels of decision-making. From the UNCCD point of view, land restoration is a critical part of the solution. Indeed, 44% of the world's agricultural land is located in dry land, which supplies up to 60% of the world's food production. Livestock and feed production represent more than 3/4 of all agricultural land. Nearly a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions are directly or indirectly related to food production. Land restoration puts people to work and creates new job opportunities. Restoration investments stimulate economic growth in other sectors. Land restoration is local by nature, benefiting communities directly. The benefits of restoration are estimated to exceed the costs by an average margin of 10-1. Therefore, let us strongly encourage governments to use stimulus and recovery measures to pivot towards sustainability and set a long-term trajectory for policy and investments in nature-positive, carbon-neutral development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Thank you for reminding us of the notion of the social contract with nature that was indeed presented by you and by the other executive secretaries a few months ago. And thank you for the notion of a long-term nature positive perspective for this. Excellent points to consider as we move forward. Let me now introduce Ms. Martha Rojas Urrego, who is the Secretary General of the Convention on Wetlands. She will deliver a message on behalf of the liaison group of biodiversity-related conventions. Ms. Rojas Urrego, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. First of all, a big thanks to Her Excellency Minister Fuad for her leadership, for your leadership, and with the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biodiversity for the organization of this very timely event. I am delighted to contribute to the discussion on behalf of the liaison group of the 8 biodiversity-related conventions: the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, the Convention on Migratory Species, the Convention on Wetlands, the International Plant Protection Convention, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, and the International Whaling Commission. The components of natural world, including the water, climate, land, and myriad life forms, are intricately connected with each other and with people. They provide the foundation for human society and for our economy. The coronavirus pandemic has highlighted the importance of the relationship between people and nature. One of the lessons that we have learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is that human, animal, and plant health are connected and interdependent. The degradation and conversion of ecosystems and growing human pressures on the natural world and wild species are increasing the risk of emergence of zoonotic diseases such as COVID-19, infectious diseases that are initially transmitted between domestic or wild animals to humans. Responses to the pandemic provide a unique opportunity for transformative change. It is essential that they include not only economic stimulus and medical responses, but also investment in the health of our planet. In doing so, it will be crucial to leverage the work of the biodiversity-related conventions as they make essential contributions to sustaining our wetlands and water resources, the health and bounty of our oceans, cooperation among range states to safeguard ecosystems, habitats, and animal species, safeguarding plant genetic resources, which are essential for agriculture and food security, the health of plants to protect human health and the environment, the preservation of irreplaceable natural and cultural heritage, and ensuring that wildlife harvest, use, and trade is sustainable and safe. The 8 biodiversity-related conventions make essential contributions to economic, social, and cultural well-being, and to human health, and can contribute to green growth and the creation of long-term sustainable jobs and livelihoods. They can provide vital contributions to building back better, preventing the emergence of future pandemics, and a holistic One Health approach for people, animals, and the environment. While each of the conventions has its unique role and objectives, our parties need to continue to work together to address the loss of biodiversity and rise to the challenges outlined in the 2019 IPBES Global Assessment. We believe there is strength in working together to address the respective but related priorities within the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and all of us stand ready to support the parties in its implementation. In addition, the conventions will have a critical role in the framework by contributing to the achievement of specific goals, targets, and indicators within their mandates in a similar way to the contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals and targets. For these reasons, I would like to stress, on behalf of the liaison group, the importance of increasing the commitment to the implementation of the biodiversity-related conventions as part of integrated and holistic approaches to addressing the global challenges of biodiversity, climate change, land degradation, and to building back better. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Rojas Urrego. Thank you very much for providing that overview, showing how all the different conventions are working together and providing a common framework to address all aspects of biodiversity work. Last but not least, let me give the floor to the new Chief Executive Officer of the Global Environment Facility, Mr. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez. You have the floor.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure to participate today to our CBD presidency, Minister Jasmine Fuad. Congratulations for putting together this seminar. To my dear friends, Patricia, Elizabeth, Ibrahim, and Marta. Qué gusto de verte, Marta. What a pleasure to see you, Marta. It's great. I will be very concrete in sending 2 or 3 messages, which are key to me. Back in COP13, we were really talking on how do we mainstream biodiversity conservation. And we invited ministers to attend our COP in Cancun, Mexico. And we invited the ministers of agriculture, ministers of fisheries, ministers of infrastructure. We never thought about inviting the Minister of Health of countries. Nowadays, the Minister of Health, besides being every day in the TV and in the news of each of our countries, is a key player in the context of building back towards a new normality. And this does demonstrate a couple of things. One, the interlinkages within human activities and nature. And today, more than ever, we have been able to recognize how fragile and vulnerable we humans are. In Costa Rica, there are 130 species of bat. Any moment, a pathogen from a wild bat can go into a human, and we will have another pandemic on top of the actual pandemic. And I think that this is something that we need to really recognize and understand, that in terms of building back a better society must begin within redefining our values and principles in the context of this broken relationship within human and nature. This is key. This is a key element. It's not just bringing more resources, it's not just bringing all sectors around this. The solution is strengthening this and redefining the relationship with nature, and values and principles are in the top of our effort to be deployed. So that is a key element, which is important. And why do we need the Minister of Health in the World Health Organization at this moment? Because if they can push for the agenda that we've been pushing for the last decade, particularly in the implementation of the Aichi targets and the NDCs and the land restoration goals and targets, by putting upfront in the health agenda the need to dramatically revert the rates of deforestation, the need to phase out all the international and domestic wildlife trade, and be able to establish a early alert system at the global level that can help us cope with future pandemics. If we are able to bring on board a larger health sanitary community into this, we may have a big chance to really move forward what we've been, putting in terms of goals and aspirations. And I think that in the context of the open-end working group and the post-2020 framework, these elements are key. The other element that I think is extremely interesting that has been a clear outcome out of this pandemic goes in two directions. One is the fact that people now believe more than ever on science and scientists. Being able to promote science-based targets is one of our most important elements in the context of what we are moving ahead. And the other element is the cost-benefit relationship associated to protect nature. You know, there was a recent article in Science that estimated that reducing the transmission of new diseases from tropical forests will cost in between $20 to $30 billion each year. You know, today the COVID-19 pandemic will likely pass us a cost of $8 to $10 trillion. So once more here, the cost-benefit relationship associated to the restoration and conservation in nature becomes a very strong political driver. I would like to finalize by saying that, yeah, we all understand that we need to put nature in the center of the green economic recovery plans, but that hasn't been mainstream in the larger political and economic community. I feel that we still have a lot to work because many countries are really struggling on the social aspects, and politicians, you know, are thinking on the short-term magical solution. And probably that short-term magical solution will mean more business as usual, more land use change, more emissions, more soil erosion. And here's where the science and our conventions and our capacities can come in and be able to complement the short-term solution with a larger mid-term solution that will move us into this new economic paradigm. In this context, the GEF is in a unique position to support countries and work across all sectors and conventions to achieve all of these benefits. Thank you so much, David, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Manuel Rodriguez. Very, very good. Thank you for bringing together and uniting the comments. The notion of mainstreaming, as we know, under all of our work, is an important key element. And thank you also for reminding us of the need to look at the so-called short-term magical solutions that people are looking for, but the consequences of this in terms of medium and longer-term work, and showing the role of the GEF and moving forward to support all of these things. Now, colleagues, we're running quite a bit behind time, so the question and answer session that we had anticipated is going to have to be really quite short. And I want exchange my apologies to all the questions. We're going to have to synthesize them together so we can have a quick round of responses from this first panel. As I look at the questions that we've seen there, there are a number of different questions that relate to the questions of forests that we look at. People have talked a lot about forests. And we mentioned that in terms of some of the large ecosystems that provide support, some of the large systems that have a role in land degradation and also in the climate agenda. So I'm going to put to each of you maybe just a little bit, a general question about this. And can we talk about, in this building back better that we need to look at, and this was to the panelists who've just spoken to us. We'll start with Patricia. Can we talk a little bit about, if we look at green recovery, that will deal with COVID, what are some of the aspects that can look at forest addressing? And for you, Patricia, that'll be the question of how can we manage this and also address the climate agenda. So I'll ask each of you to look at this question of conserving forests, the role of forests in preventing land degradation and the climate action, and linking it up with the need to build back better, including COVID. So Patricia, could I get you to just give us maybe a minute and a half, 2-minute quick thing on that? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, David. Well, of course, forests are at the heart of a green recovery from COVID-19, of a green development or sustainable development. Why? Because the forestry sector provides essential services and products to support health and livelihoods during times of crisis. They create jobs as well as related services. Healthy forests also build resilience against future pandemics. As we have mentioned before. Forests mitigate climate change and must continue to play an important role in achieving a balance between emissions and removals of greenhouse gases. They are valuable for health, for security, and they are especially important to some of the world's most vulnerable people, which are also the ones that are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. So it is very important to remember that forests are also a safety net for the rural poor, and that they provide food, they provide income, they provide nutritional diversity. They also support, especially women, especially in disadvantaged areas. Women, children, landless farmers, and other vulnerable segments of society. So forests are really linked to the 3 conventions. They are essential for biodiversity conservation and the continued delivery of ecosystem systems such as water and pollinators for agricultural crops and thus for food security. And of course, in the case of climate change, forests are one of the so-called nature-based solutions to climate change in order to have natural sinks for CO2. So there is lots of reasons why forests must be at the top of our agenda in this recovery from COVID-19. Over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Patricia. Ms. Maruma, can I move to you to speak a little bit about where you see under the convention forest protection and those resources?
Thank you, David. Indeed, forest is a unifying factor in the sense that without forest, the city's survival will also be impacted upon. The infrastructures in the cities depend on the products coming from the forest, timber, and therefore the issue of sustainable forest management then becomes key. And sustainable because this is where the whole question of biodiversity loss and the land use change, soil management comes in. The whole world we've been dealing and talking about afforestation, really to get the forest full and ensure that as part of sustainable agriculture and the expansion of the agricultural land, agricultural production does not encroach and continue to encroach the forest area, because more deforestation will actually then, those solutions which even Patricia talked about dependent on the forest, we will lose. And of course, more encroachment will bring again human beings closer to the wildlife and get us back to the problems we are facing with the transmission of zoonotic diseases from wildlife to animals. So indeed, forest is important, is a unifying factor, is a buffer, both for the rural area, for the cities. It's the employment agent. Many societies, particularly the local communities, depend on the forest management, forest products, labor for their survival. The cities equally depend on them. So ensuring the sustainability of the forest management as we build back better becomes key. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Maruma. So, Mr. Tiau, I know under the UNCCD, certainly forest protection is part of preventing and reversing land degradation. Indeed, the report on the Great Green Wall was just produced recently. Can you give us a minute and a half about this part of it?
Absolutely. Forest land use is absolutely key for everything that we do, and the unsustainable consumption patterns that we see in the world today affect all sorts of ecosystems, including forest. So I fully agree with my colleagues, Patricia and Elizabeth, when they talked about forest being the main source of revenue for the poor. But I would add that the forests are also the main source of revenue for the rich people, because they breathe air, because they drink water, because they eat food. So forest is for everybody. And it is very important that we see that in forest, there are more than trees. In forest, you have species, you have wildlife, you have food, you have communities, you have, so it is basically one of the lungs of the planet, and it is important that it should be conserved for the benefits of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tiau. Ms. Rojas Urrego, I know you'll be speaking on behalf of many biodiversity conventions, and while you do one on wetlands, there is a relationship between all the other different ecosystems and species, etc. From the point of view of the BLG, what are some of the important questions we need to look at in terms of coordination, harmonization, and forests?
So regarding forest, I wanted to perhaps focus on a particular type of forest, which is the forests that are related to water. So I was thinking about forests like mangroves or forested peatlands, which are forests that are very important in terms of the different objectives that we are discussing here. In terms of mitigation, they mitigate and they store more carbon than all the other forests. For example, mangroves store 5 times more carbon than other forests, and peatlands that are forested are also very important in terms of mitigation objectives, as well as in terms of adaptation and building resilience of communities. They also provide livelihoods, and in terms of the question regarding other conventions, many of these conventions either conserve through different types of protected areas, important ecosystems for international importance, as well as species which are important for trade, for food and agriculture, and so forth. So I thought that I would mention a specific type of forest because, of course, there is a huge diversity of this type of ecosystems, but sometimes there are some which perhaps we don't give more attention, and this type of ecosystems that are linked to water have these particular values that are worth mentioning here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, that is a type of ecosystem. It's important to remind us of the variety of services that are provided by these, and that helps link together a lot of other aspects. We'll provide one last set of comments from Carlos Manuel Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, thinking about your comments about mainstreaming, can you talk about the forest challenges and what does mainstreaming help us overcome or address in this?
Yeah, my pleasure. Even though humans have been using the fire for land use change for the last 250,000 years, forest fires will be the new normality in the Anthropocene, and we have seen it very clearly in front of our eyes. We'll be losing forests very quickly at a scale that we never saw it before. Not just because of natural forest fires, but also as a way to do land use change. And why do humans use the fire to do land use change? Because there is no economic benefit on the use of keeping those forests. So we got a huge market failure. that we've been discussing about that market failure for the last 15 years. In 2005, we agreed in Montreal, UNFCCC, to create a red plus, to create a positive incentive to recognize the environmental services being provided by owners of forests at the community, at the indigenous community level, or at the country level. Unfortunately, we haven't agreed on a global mechanism that establishes a market for carbon, for forest carbon credits and benefits, unless we develop a system, a global system that can be a top-down or a bottom-up, that recognizes the value of those forests, environmental services of those forests, that matches the cost of opportunity of doing cattle ranching or soil palm or coffee, we will continue losing our forests. That is why it is critical that next year in COP15 and in COP26, we generate a very ambitious new set of frameworks for 2030. I strongly believe that 30%, protecting 30% of the planet is the minimum that we should aim. And most important, or as important in COP26, we need to seal once and for all Article 6 that can give us the conditions for believing that we will have a market mechanism that recognizes a fair price for carbon forest credit, particularly in the tropics, that will drive into a new paradigm, economic paradigm, forest conservation. So that's key, and I'm extremely optimistic that we will achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you for bringing back the importance of getting action specifically under some of these mechanisms, and bringing back the important part of the relationship of our work to existing subsidies, incentives, both perverse and otherwise, and some of the market mechanisms we need to look at. Well, thank you very, very much for your panelists for this rich discussion. My apologies, we have to move on. We're 15 minutes behind, which is actually pretty good for many of these meetings. So I congratulate you on your discipline. I'd like to move now to our second panel discussion for the day, which is to look at the question of implementation as the key to an inclusive and comprehensive One Health approach. We've already seen some of those questions about One Health raised already, and now we'll get into some of those details. So in this session, we are very, very honored to hear from the heads of key United Nations and other international organizations who'll be focusing on this particular question here. So we'll be following the same methodology before. We'll have statements from everybody, and I'll try to synthesize a question from the chat box that will move on forward in this. So first of all, I'd like to start by welcoming and thanking and introducing Ms. Inger Anderson, who is Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program. Ms. Anderson, you have the floor.
Okay, you should be able to hear me now, and thank you. It's a fascinating discussion, and I really want to congratulate Minister Fouad for having done such a great job during her presidency. My sister up in Cairo, we thank you very much for all the good work and leadership that you have done, and we look very much forward to the next COP, where the handoff will be to our friends in China. No, let me just start out by saying that when we're looking at the One Health, well, maybe we just need to step back a couple of steps here and just say that we've seen this massive increase in human population. That's a good thing. We've gotten healthier, we've gotten stronger, we've gotten more nutritious, and we've generally done quite well as a species. Maybe our health and growth and wealth has therefore led to certain behavioral shifts. We are more wasteful, we need more, we want to have our proteins from animal protein, we have a lot of food waste, we are exploiting and using wildlife more, we have unsustainable natural resource exploitation, accelerated fragmentation, all of these things that we know. And all of that, not least obviously climate change, have been part of this story. And then when we get to, and just today, our friends at WWF have released the Living Planet report. It's probably worthwhile just taking note and saying thanks to our friends for doing that. But that report, of course, highlights the real pressure that we're putting on our planet. We all know in this audience, I'm sure, but one of those factors that maybe bears repeating is that our diseases come from nature. 70% of all new infectious diseases emerge from nature. And there is one species that has the responsibility for that. That's us. So we need to think about that, because all of that pressure that we are putting on nature is actually generating that we are getting in closer contacts, whether with wild or domesticated animals. We're putting animals closer together. We are putting animals from one continent on top of animals from another. We're trading illegally, and we're not ensuring the phytosanitary conditions that we would want to see. So with all of that then, and with us having interfered with about 75% of the land surface, and I heard you talk about forests, so I won't go there, but clearly having impacted on forests and all that that means, this means then that we have had epidemic after epidemic, and I'm sitting with Akim, who had the foresight in 2016 in the last Horizons report and Frontiers report that UNEP did, to have a chapter that looked at the frontier of zoonosis. And the issue being that zoonotic diseases was something, a frontier element that we in UNEP, I can't take credit for it, but my predecessors highlighted as something very critical, as being something that was emerging and the world better pay attention. So we then took that report of 2016 and we said, so what's new? And we're very pleased to work together with a whole host of organizations to come out with a new updated version on zoonosis. We came out with it on World Zoonosis Day, no less, 7th of July, which highlights this issue. We have zoonotic diseases left, right, and center. Rarely do they get the kind of headlines that this one got, because they're not as efficient in transmitting across the world. This one, we have to say, it's efficiency. I don't mean that in a positive way, in that it just goes by respiratory, as we assume, infections, has had this pandemic impact. But do not forget, from HIV, Ebola, West Nile, H1N1, bird flu in all its varieties, and the various coronaviruses, Rift Valley fever, Marburg, it's Nipah. Each of these have been more localized in setting, maybe reached a little bit, like bird flu did due to travel, but not as impactful. And yet, we need to understand that whilst this has been a horrible pandemic, the mortality of the current COVID-19 is actually relatively low. If you look at the mortality for Nipah or Marburg, we are up there or Ebola, you are up there in the 60 to 70%. So heads up, everybody, we need to take care of biodiversity and nature, because right now, the impacts that we have been seeing is obviously huge, but there are other diseases out there. So we need to think about what it is that we do as we fragment, encroach, destroy, illegally trade, and otherwise engage with nature in an unsustainable way. One word quickly on antimicrobial resistance, which we also need to take into account in the One Health conversation. We have overused antibiotics. In Europe, it's an issue. In the Middle East, it's an issue. We've overused antibiotics in such a way that it's too liberally used, and therefore we've got resistance. This is very dangerous. We are putting it into many of the products that we eat, and it is emitted into our waterways, etc., and has impacts on our own ability to resist. And so as we have caused habitat loss, as we have fragmented, there are some real opportunities here. We are pouring all this money into the economies across the world. And let's think about then how we can, and Akim, I'm sure, will give us some of the examples of what's the good news out there on where these things have actually been used. The stimulus money, yes, it needs to help put money in people's pockets. Let us not forget that. But over and above that, let's make sure that whether it's a climate element or a greening element or a nature element, depending on where you are, we can do something. And that something can be to encourage shift in agricultural production, less use of chemicals, maybe better water use efficiency, maybe less fragmentation, maybe. That's one area. Lots of areas we can deal with in agriculture. Let's think about food waste. What kind of incentivized systems can we put in place to ensure that food is more efficiently transported, transshipped, handled, such that today, as we all know, food waste is the third largest emitter. If it were a country, would be the third largest CO2 emitter in the world. And not only is it wasting CO2 emissions, if you like, but it is certainly wasting land and therefore causing biodiversity loss. Or let's think about what we can do in chemicals and waste, and what kind of elements we can do in to get more resource efficiency, because the whole thing about is about unsustainable production and consumption. Coming back to SDG 12, sustainability has to be the way to go. And the One Health story, planetary health, veterinary health, and wild animal health, and human health, understanding, and Maria Naira is here, and we've worked a lot with WHO and all of this, that these three things are indivisible, and that we need to have an understanding that policies that we implement in forestry can go right back into having human health impact. We know that a deforested area we see, and Maria can probably give us a number, but a massive general increase in malaria infections due to the greater humidity, etc. in the areas. So bottom line here is there is a once in a lifetime, and actually I would hope it's not in our children or our grandchildren. So it's a once in a century opportunity where this massive amount of stimulus is going into the economy, where actually we can make some shifts. That's what UNEP will be hoping to speak to, together with Elizabeth and the CBD and Akim and everyone else that is on this good panel, at the Nature and Biodiversity Summit that will take place on the sidelines of UNGA. That's what we would hope to see in terms of the vision for COP15 of biodiversity. That's what we hope to see reflected with the climate dimensions within the enhanced NDCs, and that is very much what we would want to see in the post-2020 chemicals framework. So with that, I will stop here because I know that there are many other speakers, and hand it back over to you, David.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. So thank you very much for reminding us of a number of the other issues too, the matter of antimicrobial resistance, some of the other chemicals matters. But it was also good to hear you say that we are focused on COVID now, but in fact, the question of zoonotic diseases is much broader. I mean, we have actually seen, as you said, the less efficient zoonotic diseases. We've looked at Zika, we've looked at malaria, we've looked at HIV, AIDS, which itself is an efficiency, but a number of other sources that we need to take into account to this. So thank you for giving us that big global picture, and we'll continue that on the discussion over this panel. So now I'm going to invite you all to sit back for a moment. We've received a video message from the Director General of the World Health Organization, Mr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, and he is going to be represented in the discussion later on by Ms. Maria Naira, the Director of the Public Health, Environment and Social Determinants of Health Department, the World Health Organization. So now I'll ask the technicians to please activate the video from the Director General.
Your Excellency, Minister Yasmin Fuad, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, this is an extraordinary time. No single event in modern history is more illustrative of the connections among people, animals, and the ecosystems that nurture all life on Earth. Around 2/3 of infectious diseases originate in wild and domesticated animals, and almost 25% of the global disease burden are due to preventable environmental factors. Yet, we continue to destroy nature through deforestation and land degradation, the expansion and intensification of agriculture and livestock, and unregulated harvesting and trade in wildlife. Relentless intensification of production damages our planet, sacrifices its biodiversity, and creates lasting damage to its climate. This threatens the health and security of communities everywhere, and especially poor, marginalized, and vulnerable populations. This pandemic has shown us how essential it is for governments at all levels to strengthen their capacity for prevention, preparedness, and response. But to reduce future pandemic risks, we must go further upstream than early detection and control of disease outbreaks. We must lessen our impact on the natural world to reduce risk at the source. We must come together across sectoral boundaries and adopt an inclusive One Health approach for people, animals, and our environment, recognizing that they are interconnected. WHO has released the manifesto for a healthy and green recovery, with the protection of nature at the first of 6 essential prescriptions. As governments prepare to adopt a new 10-year global biodiversity framework in 2021, I urge all those involved in planning for recovery to apply the lessons of COVID-19 for a healthier, greener, and more equitable future. Shukran Gazilan. I thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's excellent to receive that message from the Director General, reminding us of the need to not look at, as we are now in the short term, to look at the longer term upstream matters. We need to look at for that very much. To continuing our discussion now, to bring in the perspective of the United Nations Development Programme and its work and activities on the ground, I'm very happy to introduce the Administrator of UNDP, Mr. Achim Steiner. Mr. Steiner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Minister Fuad, dear Jasmine, dear Elizabeth, dear colleagues, I feel like I have rejoined the family and I have missed you because these months have gone by and here we are together, reminiscent one of the CBD presidency and the super year for nature delayed. But Jasmine, thank you for bringing us together. Elizabeth, in preparing for when we are able to bring the world back together around biodiversity and what it means in the context of building back better, which is the seminar, the webinar that we have come together today. I have in many ways great hopes. I think in listening to all of you, and let me also just extend, because I know Carlos is now on the job. So Carlos, I sent you a message, but it bounced back, but I know you are in your new position. So I think to some of what I was listening in the panel before, I would like to just echo a little bit some of my reflections. Inge has already spoken about the notion of One Health, and I think listening to our colleague Tedros just now, and Maria is here. I mean, for many years we have been articulating a notion of planetary health, of how human health depends on a healthy environment. And yet, colleagues, I think we have to face some very harsh realities, particularly over the next few months and over the next year or two. And, you know, if there are millions of people who run around in the midst of a pandemic and refuse to wear a mask, first of all, let's acknowledge that there will be many out there who simply do not wish to understand what One Health or the nexus between human health and planetary health is. We will have an agitated political reality around the world in our societies, in which trying to provide both perspective and positive direction will require us to be more than just advocates for nature. And I think this is an extremely important part also, that the next COP on biodiversity will have to continue to evolve. Why do I say this? One, because science alone is not enough to sometimes sway a public that is either not interested in this or is preoccupied with other issues or is indeed being misled by others. And I think that political reality, against the backdrop of everything that's happening in our countries, is going to perhaps increase polarization, contesting, you know, the notion of state leadership, of government, but also of those who advocate for things that are not immediately relevant to me. And however absurd that notion of immediate relevance may be, I take it as a challenge for us to try and frame that which we, through a perspective on biodiversity, nature, and our ecosystems, clearly are desperately in need of elevating in our overall policy making, economic decision making. And the latest report from WWF has again, I mean, the numbers are horrendous. And yet in the numbers of destruction, we obviously do not succeed in triggering the kind of paradigm shifts that are needed. And this is even more so the case, I believe, right now in the midst of this pandemic. And this is where I sometimes feel that I find myself in an extraordinarily challenging moment, because in leading UNDP, the development program of the United Nations, but having a very strong foot and history and identity also in the environmental community, I think it is precisely at that interface where our societies will now have to make short-term choices, but also long-term bets in how to recover. We all say build back better, build forward better. We don't go back to the old normal. I think everyone in an intuitive or in an intellectual or in an emotional way probably accepts that premise. But how on earth are we going to talk to people who have just lost everything? The 4.4 billion people who live in this pandemic without any social protection. How do we talk to countries that have already exhausted their fiscal space and are descending into ever greater debt problems, and talk to them about building back better? How do we make biodiversity, nature, the ecological infrastructure, an integral part of a vision of recovery and indeed moving beyond where we were before? And I think here we have to rapidly find a way in which we can connect the science, which tells us the imperative to act, with the opportunity to address also what people right now need more than anything else, and particularly those that are most vulnerable, poorest, most affected, which is essentially a kind of economic freefall. And it is in here that we need to find a way to be able to both demonstrate but also design interventions, initiatives that are not only going to transform the future of how biodiversity, nature, our ecosystems not only are, let's say, conserved, but also restored, but how we can immediately link that to people's livelihoods, to their very economic foundations for being able to continue to operate. I think we need to look at the world of work, of livelihood opportunities. I think we need to look at, significant, almost Keynesian narratives around investing in ecosystem restoration, in investing in ecosystem services. And, I only need to look at Carlos to know that he will be a great articulator of that, because he has lived it for the better part of his life in a country called Costa Rica. And I think in principle, we know how to connect these different narratives, but we have to do it now in the midst of a pandemic, an economic crisis, a geopolitical moment in which the world is struggling to look beyond its own people to a global family, and in which fiscal resources are going to be extremely constrained. And so UNDP, in its current lead role in the UN development family to work with the UN agencies, funds and programs through these socioeconomic assessments, is generating for me a very revealing picture of chaos on the one hand, extraordinary need to make choices right now by governments, and a certain helplessness on the part of the international community of how to rise to the challenge. And I think we need to focus our energies very much on helping national governments and authorities right now and their citizens to make priority choices, and to make that ability to address that which we discuss when we talk about biodiversity, nature, ecosystems, with also that opportunity to build forward better in a very basic human sense. Where am I going to be able to reestablish my life? How does this help me cope with the crisis? How does it help a national government to allocate, perhaps with the very precious national fiscal resources that it has, some funds also into major ecosystem restoration opportunities? The responses need to be linked also through the NDCs. Patricia is with us, Ibrahim is with us, land restoration, desertification. This is a moment where we have to embrace that notion of the green economy, or whatever you want to call it, that more systemic win-win opportunity, so that we make biodiversity a natural win-win product of a more sustainable economic recovery that can enter through the window of climate change and disease and adaptation. It can enter through ecosystem restoration, the Great Green Wall. I mean, there are many examples, and that can go to the core of economic policy where governments have to make fiscal choices. I'll leave it at that, but it is nothing new that I'm telling you. I just want to add a sense of drama to the moment, because I think what happens at the next COP, Yasmin, and you know this very well from your own domestic debates also, I think is not so much conditioned on the next brilliant articulation of how we're losing biodiversity, but on the next brilliant articulation, how on earth we're going to change the economies that are creating that kind of destruction. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Steiner. And thank you very, very much for reminding us of the context here, the human context, the livelihoods at stake, the populations out there who are asking, where do I go next? And bringing together the question of livelihoods, of development, of indeed human dignity in the context of all we're working with and its linkage to health determinants and these bigger questions we're looking at. Very much thanks. We'd like to move on now to our colleagues at FAO. We're very fortunate to have Ms. Maria Elena Semedo, who is the Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UNS. She's speaking on behalf of the Director General, Ku Jongju. So Maria Elena Semedo, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, David, and good morning, good afternoon to all. Excellency Minister Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment of Egypt, thank you very much for your leadership, for organizing this webinar and bringing all of us here together to talk about how we can build back better. Greetings from the Director General. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us today, but he sent his best regards to all of us. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, good to see you all in safe and in good health. I am very pleased on behalf of FAO to be with you all at this virtual webinar. And as it has been said by the previous speakers, COVID-19 has shown that the emergence of infectious diseases is closely linked to the pressure we are putting in our ecosystems and on biodiversity. What this means? This means that addressing important drivers of disease emergency require us, we need to halt biodiversity loss, and it calls for mainstreaming biodiversity across all sectors and all landscape. Land use change triggers a cascade of factors that exacerbate infectious disease emergency, including ecosystem fragmentation, deforestation, and pollution. I think we talk about the impact of deforestation, also the climate change and the pollution. Therefore, our food system depends on the way we preserve our biodiversity. And the future of biodiversity depends on how we manage our food system. Is not a simple equation. The erosion of biodiversity is all the more worrying, given the persistent high prevalence of food insecurity in many parts of the world. We have global population increasing, we have food insecurity increasing, and COVID-19 has exacerbated this situation. But looking at the solution, I strongly believe that agriculture holds the key to bringing all actors together to address climate change adaptation, mitigation, food security, and land degradation in a holistic manner. It's not an easy task, but the current pandemic has underlined the urgency of adopting a cross-cutting approach and stop thinking in silos. Hakim reminded us that we need to work together, we need to work at all levels, global, regional, and also at country level. But we also need to strengthen our complementarities, our interlinkages, but sometimes we have to make some trade-offs. We need to make some choice. While we need to protect the planet, the people, and livelihoods, is not a simple equation, and choice has to be made. And we hope that we'll be able to have a balance between the planet and the people. In this regard, we don't have other choice, but we need to adopt a holistic approach. In FAO, this is the way we are working, and we are driving our strategy to mainstream biodiversity across the agriculture sectors. We need to link consumers and food producers. We need to link our urban and rural societies and link all of them with the ecosystems. What FAO is doing? FAO, we are working in tackling these complex and interrelated issues, associating wildlife habitat disruption, biodiversity loss, and the spread of zoonotic diseases. In this regard, we support and scale up efforts to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystem worldwide. And we are very proud to co-lead the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration with UNEP. ING has having a very strong leadership, and we hope all the UN agencies will join us in this endeavor. We promote and implement One Health approach. We are part of the tripartite, but we have to realize that to date, most of One Health efforts has been on public health and somehow on the veterinary sectors. And we need to support the environment as well as land use planning as equally important. And this is the reason why at the tripartite, WHO, OIE, and FAO, UNEP is critical. Also, CBD is working in this global effort on the health of human, animal, but also the protection of biodiversity and environment. Another important point FAO is working is in implementing an important program on sustainable wildlife implementation. And the objective of the program is to increase the understanding and assessment of the zoonotic risk along with wild meat supply chain from the forest to both rural and urban consumers. And this is a big debate we have, how we should protect wildlife, how we should avoid the spillover, but at the same time, keep in mind that the livelihoods of millions of people depend on the wildlife. Our program assists countries to build their capacity to predict zoonotic risk. It's important that we avoid a new pandemic to arise, and we have to set up measures to prevent and mitigate those risks and their consequences on public health, food systems, and biodiversity. As you know, we are working on the preparation of the Food System Summit, and we hope the Food System Summit will be able to integrate all of those elements where we come up with the bold recommendations. And to conclude, let me emphasize that the transformation to mainstream biodiversity across agriculture sectors and to prevent a new diseases outbreak will not happen without the farmers, the fisher folk, the livestock keepers, and the forests, without consumers, government, international organization, and strategic partnerships. This is important. All are important for us to build back better. And in building back better and green, we must consider the health of people, the health of animals, and the health of environment. And we need to recognize that they are interconnected and interdependent. And I thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Maria Elena Semedo, for that. Thank you for demonstrating all the different dimensions of how FAO's work plugs into and connects with the One Health approach. And again, reminding us that this is about the people on the ground, the farmers, the fisher folk, the others as well. This is part of all of our work together. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to move on now. We have a video message coming to us from the new Director General of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, Mr. Bruno Oberle. He will be represented later on in the session by Cyriac Sendashonga, who's the Global Director for the Policy and Program Group of IUCN. But now I'll ask the technicians to activate the video from the Director General of IUCN. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Ms. Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment of Egypt. Your Excellency, Mr. Wang Rongqiu, Minister of Ecology and Environment of China. Ms. Elizabeth Maruma, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Senior government officials, leaders of international organizations, partners and friends. Good afternoon. I'm very honored to participate in today's events on Building Back Better and to show how IUCN can help lead the global implementation of One Health. IUCN has recognized for decades that human health is intricately connected to the health of the natural world. We know that clean water, for instance, gives us sanitation, nutrition, and prevents the spread of diseases. This is why we are so pleased to see One Health promoted as a response to COVID-19. We can implement One Health with the help of nature-based solutions which protect, sustainably manage, and restore ecosystem. Nature-based solutions address societal challenges while benefiting both nature and people. In fact, helping to resolve human health is an explicit objective for nature-based solutions. Furthermore, nature-based solutions protect the complexity of the natural environment, which will reduce our vulnerability to future pandemics and help people overcome the biodiversity and climate change crisis. On a deeper level, nature-based solutions and One Health build on the same scientific and philosophical foundation. They share multidisciplinary problem solving, systems-based understanding and analysis, and stakeholder inclusion. This makes them perfect allies to build back better. We can already see nature-based solutions being applied to help the recovery from COVID-19. Just look at New Zealand, where the government budgeted 1 billion New Zealand dollars to create 11,000 jobs through investment in nature. IUCN is proud to share that we can help governments, businesses, and stakeholders implement the One Health approach with the support of the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions, launched 2 months ago. This standard will provide a globally consistent approach to implementing nature-based solutions and measuring their success and benefit. Because of the standard's focus on solving societal challenges, on inclusive governance, and on biodiversity net gain, we know that it can implement One Health and that it can implement it in an inclusive and comprehensive way. We can use natural-based solutions to help make One Health a reality for all. IUCN is happy to help in that journey to ensure healthy nature for healthy people.
Colleagues, I think the video came to an abrupt end. Is that what happened to everyone else too? Yes, okay, that one, okay. So technicians, are we able to get that back, or are we hit the end for that? Okay. Well, here we go.
Your Excellency, Ms. Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment of Egypt. Your Excellency, Mr. Wang Rongqiu, Minister of Ecology and Environment of China. Ms. Elizabeth Maruma, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Senior government officials, leaders of international organizations.
Yeah, pardon me, colleagues. I think we seem to have a bit of a challenge with the particular video here. I think what we'll be doing, and I'll have to apologize in advance to Ms. Syriac Sendashonga. We may ask you to complete when we get you to turn to remarks some of the things we were looking for from the Director General. So our apologies there. This is what adaptive management looks like on the ground. You see this.
Hi, David. If I may, I think he was actually at the end of his video, probably just missing the thank you and that sort of, salam aleik at the end, but he was pretty much done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Siri. So listen, colleagues, thank you very much for this panel. So I think as a result of the comments there, we have a variety of understandings of what One Health means in terms of environment, in terms of human health, in terms of livelihoods from a variety of different perspectives. Now, we are really running very much behind time, and we want to leave time for Minister Fouad to have her remarks. So one thing I would like to do, because we have taken the time for Maria Naira, who's the Director of Public Health, to be here, so we'll make sure that she's able to speak to us, and then also Siri Sendashonga. Now, one other question, just matter for all the people who participated here and provided questions. We had such a rich discussion that the time for our panelists to address these questions has been extinguished. But do note that these questions are here, and we will be taking these into account in the report. And indeed, we know that there's some specific recommendations that come out of this right here as well. So Maria, can I turn to you, Maria Naira, who's the Director of Public Health of the Environment and Social Determinants of Health Department of the WHO. Maria, can I get you to provide just a few reflections on what you've heard in this last panel, particularly looking at questions of coordination, mandates with everyone, that sort of thing. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you can. You can ask me that because I've been following very carefully the very important interventions made until now by my UN family. I'm so pleased. For me, one of the very clear comments around this is that all the arguments made from an environmental point of view, from a development point of view, from FAO, from biodiversity, from animal health, all of them from nature conservation, I think there is no disagreement. I think they are all perfectly aligned. All arguments reinforce each other, and all arguments supported each other technically and scientifically. So I think this is a very strong already kind of step on what we need to do now. This is clearly a very exceptional time, the one we are facing at the moment, and exceptional times will require exceptional leadership. And I think this is a very important moment for the UN family, who has been putting all of these arguments together, making the connections, the linkages, the triple or even more wins. If we tackle the causes of climate change, we will be protecting the biodiversity, we will be protecting human health, we will be contributing to better development, we will have healthy diets. The question now on this very exceptional time where the society is facing, as Achim was saying, we are facing a terrible economic recession where the capacity for our citizens to absorb more negative news about what will be the next threat, what will be the next apocalypse is very, very low. I think we have to prove that we are extremely relevant. We are at the right moment, ready to provide those very strategic directions that now we need to take. And my provocative questions to all of you will be, we know what, we have a very good diagnosis. I think we have even some prescriptions. I'm talking as a doctor here. Now we need to say what we do with the patient. We send it to the intensive care. We put him on recovery. He needs a blood transfusion. He needs surgery. And who is going to do it? And I think the time to do all of that will be very, very short. I think we are all very, very much in agreement regarding what needs to be done. A shift on the way we produce food. I cannot agree more with the colleague from FAO. The way we interact with the animals, and then we need to protect as well the antimicrobial resistance, which is yet another massive public health issue coming in. the way of the fact that unless we address our relationship with the environment, with the ecosystems, we will be very vulnerable to new pandemics, to new emerging infectious agents. And I think we all agree as well with the fact that if we help the countries to use those stimulus packages now in the right way, but very quickly, because the recovery is already starting and the governments are already starting to put money, maybe the wrong places. So that's why we need to move very, very quickly. I think the coronavirus teaches so many things, but among others, and Achim was referring to that as well, it teaches us that if you have the right arguments and people is really concerned, you can have the right financial investment as well. We have paralyzed the planet, we have paralyzed travel, we have asked people to wear masks universally. Who will imagine anything like that few months ago, or when we were fighting for a tobacco framework convention, for instance, when we were telling people 8 million dead, so we need a framework convention on tobacco, and then the reaction was, no, that will be a conflict of interest for our economy. I think that all of those pieces give us now an extra responsibility for showing an incredible leadership, helping the countries to drive now on this healthy, green, and sustainable recovery. I think the health arguments are there. I think they are very, very powerful. I think those will be very well received by our society, provided we put it in positive and say, if we do that, we will reduce your vulnerability and your health will be more protected. Look at the example of the vaccines. The world is now on an incredible healthy competition to develop a vaccine for a virus. Normally, a vaccine for a virus takes 10 years minimum. And here we might be able to have it in 1 year because we founded the investments for paying and supported the scientists. We put all the political will behind, and hopefully this will result in something that the society is very much on demand. So I think if we put those elements, we can have our environmental health sustainability vaccine as well. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Maria Neira, for providing that other contextual aspect for it too. I'm going to give just maybe, I don't know, a couple of minutes, 90 seconds for Cyriac Sendashonga as well for IUCN. You know, you've looked at all the other panelists. We've talked about the dimensions of the One Health response. If you had to zoom in on IUCN's particular focuses for this, what can you say?
Thank you, David, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be in this webinar. And as our new Director General said in the video that unfortunately ended kind of abruptly, but I can assure you, David, because I had seen it in its completeness, there wasn't much left. I think he was just thanking again for the opportunity and for IUCN to have been associated to this event. So let me begin by reiterating that on his behalf and thanking the Minister Yasmin Fouad of Egypt and my sister Elizabeth Maruma from CBD for having invited IUCN to be part of this very interesting and very timely webinar. I was there from the beginning, even when I hadn't switched on my camera, obviously, so I listened carefully. And I think what is really interesting is to see the convergence of everything that everybody is saying, which is not surprising. We sort of are all from the same big family, we're looking at, you know, the intersex between nature and between people from different entry points. But as many of you have said, I think what we have now noticed, what we have realized with this pandemic is that the old debate that we used to see around, you know, environment or nature versus development no longer applies. If we want to, if we care about people, we have to care about nature. And when we care about nature, we care about people. So IUCN obviously, as the organization, very much invested in that nature conservation agenda. We, as you heard from the message of the Director General, we're happy to work with all the stakeholders, As you know, our membership is not just the civil society, but also states, government, or government agents, etc., which makes it this large family where many people come together to be able to work on solutions to different problems. And we recently launched this, what he mentioned, the nature-based solution global standards, which is really a framework that brings together a set of benchmarks to be able to actually, implement that approach called nature-based solutions, which you had seen or you have heard it now for more than 10 years, but it tended to mean different things for different people. And that was a way to sort of put it in something that can provide a basis for comparison, so that when one country or one group of stakeholder, one community, one private sector entity is doing things in different parts of the world in the name of nature-based solutions, you can actually see whether you can compare apples and apples rather than apples and oranges. And in that sense, the health agenda kind of aligns to that or blends within that, because those nature-based solutions, which are meant to be a contribution of what nature itself offers us to be able to address and solve many societal challenges. Obviously, the health connects to that. As many had said, if you look at it from, say, a nutrition point of view, from human well-being, from mental health, nature is somehow always into the equation. So we're happy to be associated and to be able to work with all of you. Obviously, we had, like everybody else, this COVID pandemic, unfortunately, came to derail a lot of the things that were on the horizon, on the super year that was meant to be super year for nature, starting with the IUCN Congress that was supposed to have taken place a couple of months back, and was one of the signposts on the journey towards COP15 in China. But we hope that this journey will continue, and I think these sort of initiatives, like the discussion we are having now, to really continue build the momentum to keep the agenda going forward. And we are going to overcome this crisis, and hopefully we will be in a better place. We will have learned some lessons, the most important one being that when we talk under the SDG agenda of leaving no one behind, as I used to say in wherever I had an opportunity to be at the UN in those discussions about leaving no one behind, I do hope that in that no one, nature is also included, because it's the only smart way to really move forward. So with that, I thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sendashonga, for providing that perspective. So we're looking at people, we're looking at livelihoods, we're looking at nature is also not being left behind in this as well. We are over time, and it is really up to us now to pass the microphone and the podium back to our wonderful host and organizer of this meeting, Minister Yasmin Fouad, who can offer us her reflections and comments on the rich discussion that we've just seen. Minister Fouad, over to you.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks to everyone. Thanks, Inger, Achim, and Ibrahim, and Elizabeth, and Martha, and everyone that is around the table, even those who have left, Carlos, and all our friends, partners, and colleagues. I want really to take over from where Achim was mentioning related to seeing this not really as a drawback, although it is a drawback, but for us, I do see it as an opportunity. And I don't want it to be a missed opportunity. And that's why I called for that meeting. Let me give a quick on what Egypt has done with that crisis, not as managing the epidemic and the work that relates to the risk management and the partial lockdown, which is the work of my colleague, Minister of Health. But how did we look at that green recovery part or building back better? Two things that we have done. First, the first part was the thing that we have all dreamt of all our life is to mainstream the sustainability measures within our investment plan, our own natural resources, and this has been done in joint venture with the planning ministry, and the announcement of the new green bonds with the Ministry of Finance. And why I'm saying this, because if countries start not only of thinking how to build back better and showing the linkages of either the One Health approach or the linkages between the climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity without having specific tools and means of implementation of greening their own finance, that will not be possible. It will be just rosy word or even be a policy reform paper. So that is the first thing, is to focus more on what will be the exact means of implementation and how the UN agencies, each within its own expertise and specialized part, support in that. Secondly, within the coming couple of weeks, there will be the Nature Summit, as we are in the super year for biodiversity. I think out of that meeting, we need to find like a statement, a communique, a trilateral communique between the three conventions that will be sent out to the presidents, to the summit, to His Excellency, the UN Secretary General, calling not only for the One Health approach, but that kind of coherent and kind of a wake-up call, an important call of that there is no health of human beings if the planet is not healthy. Putting that simply and requesting more work to be done in that. Thirdly, which I think would need to reflect on all the discussion that has been there on the science, on the policy, on the forest, on how can we build back better, how can we look on the One Health approach. We need not to miss the youth and the future generation. There are vast opportunities if we click and have them as a strong alliance and a catalyst to that process. They will do magic. If we keep ourselves in our own rooms, if our own country is trying to think of policies, financial resources, how to build the capacities, without really engaging them with their innovative ideas, with what they can do, of raising their awareness, we will not progress much. We need to jump. We don't need to walk because time is critical. Thank you all very much. And I really appreciate every single time that each and every single one of you have given in this important, very important webinar. Much appreciated. Over to you, David.
Thank you very, very much, Your Excellency. So thank you again on behalf of everyone for your convening of this meeting, your organizing, bringing together. Thanks to others for bringing their time. So just to note that all of the questions that are here will be gathered and integrated into a report, and we'll be looking at addressing these as a follow-up for this. And as we've seen, there's a lot of intention and movements to move forward. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be on this fine planet of ours. I invite you all to be safe, to be energetic, and let's work forward towards the future of life in harmony with nature. Have a very good day.